Well, wasn't expecting a 1 week delay, but you guys have had plenty of time to read the Reading and the Importance of Living. And today, to get things started, we're actually going to go with a slightly different approach. So a lot of times when we're working on reading and learning how to read critically, half of the job is understanding individual text, right? The other half is about being able to make those crossovers, taking what you've learned from one piece into another piece. And if you can do this kind of work, then you can start to conquer a lot of other readings on your own, right? No matter what reading. That really is the gist or point of this class, is to train you to have that ability to just take on any reading based on past experience, right? So there's a compounding effect. This is what I'd like to call meta-analysis or meta-thinking. Meta as in, Facebook. But meta means, whenever you see the word meta, how do you explain it? Anybody? Right, but meta has a function, right? It's kind of like f of x of something equals y, but meta does something to the word. What does it do? So whenever you see meta something, like meta cognition, meta means like for example, meta-analysis as the analysis of analysis. Right? In like science, if you guys are going to STEM, like biology, you're going to see a lot of reports that say meta-analysis of something. And what they do is they actually take a lot of many reports or many lab results, and then they compound it into one single result through meta-analysis. That's what it means. Analyzing analysis. Same thing with metacognition. It's the cognition of cognition, like understanding. It's a bit funky to think about, but just to keep in mind, right? For example, here, what we're doing with meta-analysis is we're taking the individual analysis of readings and then importing it into what we're seeing here. Seeing what we can see as patterns. Another way to look at meta-analysis is simply pattern recognition. Right, I've mentioned this before as we were reading on the shortness of living. Half of your job is basically pattern recognition, right? If you eat something that's red and has, cone-shaped, eventually you're going to have the pattern in your head that this thing is going to be spicy, right? You're going to learn that if it looks like this, it probably is going to be spicy. Same thing with reading. As long as you can develop that pattern recognition ability, all of this other reading process is going to be made much easier, right? So you're not starting from scratch every time. Okay, so what we're going to do today, in at least the first part of class, is I want you guys to work together with the person next to you on meta-analysis, right? Taking the themes that we've found or noticed here on the shortness of life and finding those sentences or passages that indicate or highlight similarities, right? The reason why I gave this passage is because there are a lot of similarities in themes or underlying ideas, right? Whereas what's really interesting is this is from ancient Rome, right? Like, what is it? Something AD, like 20 AD, 2,000 years ago. Whereas this is a piece written in 1987? 37, there we go. 37 with or about Chinese philosophy. Right? Two opposite ends of the planet, two opposite or different cultures and totally different time zones, right? One is, but similar ideas. This is intentional, right, in the choice. But now I want you guys to work together with the person next to you and just go through using this piece, right? Whenever you find a similarity, just use like a certain color. For example, like a passage over here. You want to underline a sentence and then give me the page number or paragraph on the shortness of life. So where is it located, the same ideas? And so when we come back in our analysis, we can then find it very quickly as a class together, okay? And Austin, I can work with you on that. All right, let's do that for, let's see, about 20 minutes. Where's my timer? So this here. And go. Yeah. Yeah. Mia, do you want to move over here with Austin? Start reading now.
No, I read it. I read a summary on Google.
I finished it already.
Okay.
I read a summary on Google.
Of what? Of the book?
Yeah, the whole thing.
That's not gonna help you. It's way too broad.
The only problem right now is I read this thing 2 weeks ago and I already completely forgot it.
Did you annotate?
Yeah.
Okay, then that'll help you a lot, like a lot more, right?
SAT prep did not help.
Now, what's the time? I still cling to these things.
Without age, but not. Remember that was the end of something. It's like a sentence that says, I only pay like the age and not the stuff. Yeah. I don't know where.
Besides, sometimes too much.
Where's the similarity?
What do you mean, where's the similarity? It's literally
All
showing.
of them almost to be
Without more than 100 years of his
This
disposal.
is talking about walking around with monkeys.
Then look at the second page.
Qualified as a business risk balance. On one day, therefore, it's being quickly determined.
and four. And I might also look at using the title and from this title, remember we talked about the accounting of life, death, and moral morality. So we like basically we know that this paper is going to talk about how how we should like connect with the relationship. And in forms of living, by looking at this, I might say, this is like the board part. Yeah, right. Why should we know the method for living? Like that. That's how I see it. Other parts. How about this one? I don't know if they're similar to that in parts of living. Did you finish this? I don't know. I figured out this and this one. Actually, the same one, but this is like but I don't know if they are complicated because in this one it mentioned that human being thinks even more complicated. That's why we don't really feel it. That's why we feel it short things. If we make anything too complicated, I don't know if there's something like that for all.
Conceal that title does make me feel happy and also nice. Hi, Maxine. Just to fill you in, we're trying to do a comparison. So we're taking this piece from The Importance of Living and finding all the similarities that it has with On the Shortness of Life. And then just putting the page numbers of this on this piece. And then afterwards, we're going to reconvene and work through it together. Oh,
I can tell international competition and
上一次没有拿到吗
but I don't know who.
Here you go. It's a good read.
So if there aren't, then we might.
Austin, have you been able to find stuff?
Yeah.
Page 3.
These things. Themselves. Yeah, this is the same paragraph as what we mentioned here. You can tell and hear the sentence. The accents are clear, you don't really tell. So, yeah, okay.
Yo. So are you sure? Are you aware what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Just wanted to fill you in. Monday. Things.
Well, I lost the packet,
Uh-huh.
right? I searched the book up. There's like 400 pages.
Yeah, there's four.
I'm like, no.
Just email me, dude. Like,
No.
Yeah,
just email
And
me.
then like just now I was preparing myself for class, right? So you know how you gave me another packet for this? This was in the other packet. Like it was in. So I was like, should I read it? Or should I
Too
read
smart
the
for
summary?
yourself. You're like, put it in so you don't lose it, and you
Yeah.
forgot you put it in.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, summary time.
Yeah, summaries aren't that useful, and
we don't have any homework today, right? We're having some.
there's gonna be a much shorter reading. So get you.
Shorter than this?
Oh yeah, you guys all read it already. Yeah, you guys read the reading already. Yeah, it's okay. We'll get to it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Please, I have to come back next week to spare me for Sunday.
The life is hard part. It is.
You're gonna pay next year, man.
I mean, no, I do have hip hop, but it's just.
I'm a long forgotten.
Ah, God.
I only play the summer so I can avoid the adaptation.
Yeah, then you're really gonna hate next year. Are you honest? Oh, it's gonna be hell. What? Lower the annotations are like 30 pages to read.
What did you involve?
That's what the teachers do.
I think, how you said, this part is talking about how people lose all from the scholars and bodies, this part is actually talking about this part is kind of like repeal maybe with this part, because this part is other about these people.
No. Give me back.
That's right. You said
Give me back my thing.
almost like,
Are you copying my annotations?
of course not.
Of course you are.
We can extract two same things. So I'm simply listen. You can actually do that. Because this tells us a lot. Our first scene is talking about what was our first scene about? We passed out about which is same as this one. Second thing is about
A monkey and a monkey guy is different.
Oh, you literally monk. A monk is legally a Chinese beggar, at least in that time. He used to go around begging for stuff. And
We can also expect this, but this
What?
will be better.
what?
For you.
It happens. Murder is so frequent. It's like no better than the pistachio politics.
You learn those colors and the position more than themselves, more than leisure, which we can expect from this one. And
But yeah, seriously, you can walk around begging for stuff and expecting to get stuff in return.
three things.
Is there a trash can? What's it outside?
It's the one outside.
Which page is it? Oh, here. Oh, yeah. This.
Evan, are you feeling better now?
Yeah.
Oh, was it an experience?
It was just like cough, and then I was good the next day. But then I just have to be quarantined for a week.
Wait, so you didn't get like a really sore throat?
Just a little bit for a day, and then I was fine.
What is this virus?
Now you have like, I got it. And it's like,
Yeah, give me a badge, right? Like a sticker. Yeah. I'm not gonna be like, I'm immune until the next variant.
There's so many variants, so it's kind of pointless to call yourself in.
Yeah, the show must go on.
How long do you think this is gonna go on?
Until we get over it. It won't ever go away, I don't think so. But like, until we're like mentally done with all of the lockdowns, which I think most of us are.
Oh, we screwed up big time.
I mean, like, it's no longer a health issue, it's more of like an economic, political issue now because we were printing money. And so now we have like a lot of other problems to worry about.
But aren't we kind of dodging the virus here?
I mean, it's not even that issue anymore, right? Like, it's less of a concern.
Oh yeah, wasn't there a monkeypox thing?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Great, so two
Great.
pandemics.
Okay, so regardless of the pandemic, let's get back to class. William, why don't you start us off with connection you found?
Basically, being announced, you kind of have this logic, like where you got from this matter, like the beauty of life is its simplicity. Like,
Okay.
So it kind of relates to Seneca's view of life. Like there was this bit where Seneca was ranting about how people kept worrying about the most insignificant issues.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of forgot what page that was, but yeah, we went there.
Okay, can you go find that?
Oh.
Can you go find that page for Seneca and for the importance of living? Okay. Mia, what about your group?
Wait, for the being out.
Hold on, William, hold on. Let's have Mia finish first.
Oh, okay. So, where is it? Oh, I found it. It says, it's page 356. It talks about how, like, I have looked at my life and leisure, and it seems that I have come to awakening to a sense of life as like a tragedy. And that kind of connects to the other reading of how, like, living in leisure is like a full one.
Okay, so right here, you said, I have looked at my life in my leisure. It seems that I have come to an awakening through a sense of life's tragedy. Okay, and what's the connection?
for busy people is to live in leisure and to like have nothing to worry about because like that's like life.
Good.
It kind of like contradicts a little bit because this is kind of talking about how living leisure is like tragedy.
Uh huh. Great. Is there like a particular passage or line that you can point us to for Seneca's piece? William, what about you?
For bringing out Shimon, it's page 359, and for Seneca, it's page 18.
359 and page 18. Okay. Leisure is another one. Cool. Okay. Ryan, you got anything for us?
I think a quote can represent the comparison story is that we all have two lives. The second begins when we realize that we only have one.
Is that you just came up with that quote?
Yeah.
Good, great.
So, like the importance of living this is hard to live an old man with white hair on his head marching slowly with a stoop in his official position and unwilling to let him go, and he still looks back. It's kind of says that his life is going to end and he still regret what he hasn't done. It's in
3,
356.
356. I think it's up here, right, in the first paragraph? First sentence. Right, okay, so it's 355 where he says, I sometimes see an old man with white hair on his head marching slowly with a stoop in an official procession, still clinging to these things and unwilling to let them go. One day he quits office, he looks about with knitted eyebrows, inquiring if the carriage is ready. He is still slow to depart, and passing out of the city gate of the capital, he still looks back. When back at his farm, he still disdains to occupy himself with planting rice and hemp and beans. And morning and night he will be asking for news from the capital, where he will still be writing letters to his friends at the court. And such thoughts flit back and forth in his breast ceaselessly until he draws his last breath. Sometimes an imperial order for his recall to office arrives at the moment when he is breathing his last. And sometimes the official messenger arrives with the news just a few hours after he closes his eyes. Isn't this ridiculous? How have you trained yourself that you are able to emancipate yourself from such things in a good time? Right. And Ryan makes a really good point, right? This old man, as an example, is someone that never realized that he only had one life, right? Wherever he was, even when he was retired, all he was doing was thinking about his job, right? Another nice way for you to do analysis is to use like this, a nice pithy quote where you can then draw themes from here and then import them into your analysis, right? Like some key words that you can come out of this is realize. What does it mean to realize? To become aware, right? Which is consciousness or self-awareness. And that's the theme that we can use to test whether or not these are similar themes in both pieces, right? And we can certainly say that self-awareness is also very clear in both pieces. So there are many ways to find themes, right? Whether or not it's just reading directly or using quotes that you know in your head that, you know, was brought up as we were going. Good. Annie, what about your group? Sorry, where is it?
It's on 356.
Okay.
The years of nature are standing on the
Uh-huh.
Here, and go on the day of my life.
The time is how we use it is a nice theme. Good. Okay, and then what's the corresponding page in Seneca?
Page 9.
Page 9. Let's see.
Beyond the problem,
This one? Where in page 9? First paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, first paragraph here. Okay. The actual time you have, which reason can prolong through it, though it naturally passes quickly, inevitably escapes you rapidly. For you do not grasp it or hold it back to try to delay the swiftest of all things, but you let it slip away as though it were something superfluous and replaceable. That's a really great example here, right? Here he's arguing that, actual time you have, while it passes by quickly, you can actually prolong it through reason, right? You can actually make use of it, but you don't, you let it slip away. And the quote here, right? Today passes and never returns, and although tomorrow comes, it is no longer today. This year passes and never returns, and although there is next year, it is no longer this year. Very similar idea, but said in a totally different way, right? And so the days of nature are steadily lengthened or unrolled, while the days of my life are shortened. And outside the 36,000 mornings, time does not belong to me. And he goes on to give us more examples. He says, how many moments are there when the day is beautiful and the company enjoyable, when the moon and the wind are good and our heart is at ease and our spirit happy, when there is music and song and wine and we can enjoy ourselves and while away the hours, right? Great. Okay, Chelsea, what about your group?
we found
Oh, I missed you guys. I'll come back to you guys.
Can I
Yeah.
add something to
Yes.
anything else? We found the same sentence in the importance of living,
Okay.
and we feel like in page 5 of the shortness of life.
So on page 5 on the shortness of life.
So how little of your own was left to you, you realize that you're dying prematurely. I feel like I got the same feeling when I read it.
Yeah, right? How little of your own life was left to you will realize that you are dying prematurely, not using your time wisely, right?
And
Okay.
the other one is 355.
Okay.
The importance of life. The third paragraph.
Okay.
Now, wealth and power and the glories of the world are the things in which people get easily drowned.
Now, wealth and power and the glories of this world are things in which people get easily drowned. Okay.
Which talks about how people use their power and positions for more important things than their lives themselves.
Yep.
We found the same thing, nothing similar, in page 5, shortness of life, last paragraph. You'll notice that the most powerful and highly stationary are the traveling ones, in which they pray for leisure praises and rate higher for their blessings.
Good. So even the paragraph before that, right? He says, so what is the reason for this? This is on page 5. You are living as destined to live forever. Your own frailty never occurs to you. You don't notice how much time has already passed, but squander it as though you had a full and overflowing supply. That all the while, the very day which you are devoting to somebody or something may be your last. Right? That's the example of the old man thinking about the court. Right? You act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire. You will hear many people say, when I am 50, I shall retire into leisure. When I am 60, I shall give up public duties. And what guarantee do you have for a longer life? Who will allow your course to proceed as you arrange it? Aren't you ashamed to keep for yourself just the remnants of your life, and to devote to the wisdom only that time which cannot be spent on any business? How late it is to begin really to live just when life must end. How stupid to forget our mortality and to put off sensible plans to our 50th and 60th year, aiming to begin life from a point at which few have arrived. Very good. Anything else from you guys? This is self-awareness, material desires as distraction, right?
Persons are not like the same things with different sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking for leisure, looking for freedom.
Yes. Good. Freedom is another one. Okay. Timothy, what about your group?
I don't have anything else.
Maxine or Caitlin, you guys want to help him out? I think page 360 on the enjoyment of living, the importance of living. There is a middle part where he says, he's describing a party, right? When people come to a feast where lambs and cows are killed and delicacies that come from land and sea are laid out on the table, they all enjoy them at first, but when they come to the point of satiety, they begin to feel a sense of repulsion. Much better are the meals of plain rice and green vegetables, which are mild and simple and good for one's health, and which will be found to have a lasting flavor after one gets used to them. People also enjoy themselves at first in parties where there are beautiful women and boys, where some beat the drum and others play the sen, and a lot of things are going on in the hall. But after the mood is past, one gets, on the contrary, a sense of sadness. It is much better to light incense and open your book and sit quietly and leisurely and maintain a calm of spirit, and charm deepens as you go along. Right? There's a lot of themes that are going on here, right? Simplicity, mildness versus contrast. This idea of calm, of spirit, and leisure here. As I'm reading, oftentimes I get a sense of what's going on through key words, right? Certain words give you the rest of what you need to know. What is good for one's health, for example, right, is simple. That's what he's trying to drive with the story here. Well, we have something similar, right, on page I think it's towards the second half here, page 9. Yeah, page 9 of On the Shortness of Life, where he says, but among the worst offenders I count those who spend all their time in drinking and lust, for these are the worst occupations of all. Other people, even if they are possessed by an illusory semblance of glory, suffer from a respectable delusion. You can give me a list of miserly or hot-tempered men who indulge in unjust hatreds or wars, but they're all sinning in a more manly way. It is those who are on a headlong course of gluttony and lust who are stained with dishonor. Examine how all these people spend their time, how long they devote to their accounts, to laying traps for others, or fearing those laid for themselves, to paying court to others or being courted themselves, to giving or receiving bail, to banquets, which now count as official business, you will see how their activities, good or bad, do not give them even time to breathe. Right? And then this idea of calmness comes from what's on the left, page 8, where he says, for what can be above the man who is above fortune? Nothing, because he is someone who makes his own luck. And the same idea that this man has calm of spirit, right, if he is not dependent on fortune, right? He has his own independence. Okay. So let's take a look at the board, what we've done so far. What we've simply done is do a cross-pollination of the themes from one to the other, right, and back and forth. And we actually have several really useful themes or ideas to play off of. These are really useful for you, for example, when you're writing essays, or you're trying to figure out a theme to talk about. Like when you're in class, your teachers are going to assign you different readings. But what essays should I write about? What topics am I going to work on? Picking from these are going to help you a lot because there are lots of overlaps, right? And the more overlaps there are, the easier it is for your research, the easier it is for you to have deeper, more important analysis, right? And how do these things relate to each other? Simplicity, leisure, self-awareness, material desires as distraction and freedom. All of these themes somehow have mutual connections too, right? What kind of leisure? For example, leisure can be seen by some as this kind of material desire. Others argue true leisure is simplicity. So that's another argument, right? And then you can even say like certain leisures, the material ones, and its relation to freedom. The simple ones and that relation to freedom, right? The kind of leisure that includes a lot of drinking, a lot of eating, a lot of partying, the material ones do not lead to freedom, whereas the kind of leisure that are simple does, right? And that freedom leads to calmness, right? And good mental health. And happiness, right? Whereas these kinds don't, because it doesn't, right? Self-imprisonment. So that very quickly is an essay, right? That's something that you can write about. For college, for school, like it just depends on whether or not the class asks in certain ways. It makes your life even easier when your teacher gives you a prompt, right? If the prompt is, how can one best use their time according to these authors? Well, don't get caught up in the materials. Live a simple life, right? Choose the right leisures. These are just very easy ways for you to know where to look, right? Now that you have them categorized in themes, then you look for the sentences, then you use those sentences to build your essay. It's just like Lego, right? You just need to know what colors and what blocks you need, and then piece it together from there, rather than working backwards. It's a lot faster. Okay. Any questions, thoughts so far? This kind of stuff is weird because we don't really talk about it in school, but then, it's very easy for you to just go on and talk about other pieces of reading, right? If I hand you something else, maybe it's a totally different theme, totally different idea, but you can use that same skill. Whatever you've seen in the past, whatever your own experience is, put it into something else. Add it into your new readings. And then eventually, you're just going to have more and more of these networks of ideas and understanding. Okay, so let's go on and tackle the importance of living as a reading. So you're handed a piece in the middle of a book on page 355, and you're expected to understand what's going on, right? At what point does the reading start to make sense? Like Austin, you were saying how like you have no idea what's going on at first. Like at what point does the reading start to make sense? Yeah.
It just eventually did. I don't know. I don't think there's a specific line.
Uh-huh.
It's just. I don't know.
there is a point, right? But it's like you're kind of picking up clues, and then finally something emerges. Chelsea, what about you? What do you think?
You want me to talk about specific?
The experience of reading this actually, like.
For me, examples for historical questions,
Mm-hmm.
then I will start to know, oh, alright, this is the point.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing.
Mm-hmm. And I see your piece. I have highlights here and not much in the beginning, right? The beginning of these 2 pages are anecdotes. Very quickly, I realize they're simply stories, right? It's a story about someone doing something, and I don't really see a point up until that last part of these 2 pages, right? There's simply an illustration of this old man in the mountains, and then this interesting moment where he like meets an old man, and he's like, please teach me the way, and then the old man just disappears, right? But that doesn't tell us anything. It's like, it's still really confusing. And then wandering further on, he chances to come upon an old friend of his. Sometimes when he thinks of those people with whom he had formed a friendship on the basis of love and prose poetry, blah, 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 blah. It's like, what am I reading, right? And then finally we get to this point where he says, are you not indeed a carefree man? His friend says, now wealth and power and glories of this world are things in which people get easily drowned. That's when I know, right? Like, okay, at least I can confidently think or talk about these ideas. Being carefree, themes of wealth, power, glories of the world, right? In which people easily get drowned. That's right up the alley on the shortness of life, right? Sometimes I see an old man so just this sentence alone, it's like, okay, something is sticking, right? Whatever sticks, is useful material. Like, if you already see these similar words alone, it's worth noting, right? How it's going to turn out, we're not sure, but at least we can make a mark and say, okay, that's probably going to be something that we can think of. Okay, so William, why don't you start us off by reading this part? Are you not indeed a carefree man? We'll go into the readings.
Are you not indeed a carefree man? Now wealth and power and glory of this world are things in which people easily get drowned. I sometimes see an old man with white hair on his head marching slowly with a stoop in an official procession. Still cleaning these things and unwilling to let them go. And one day in his office, he looks about with knitted eyebrows, inquiring if George is ready. He is still slow to depart. Passing on to the city gate of the capital, writing letters to his friends at the court. Such talks go back and forth in his breast ceaselessly until he draws his last breath. Sometimes an imperial order for his recall of small business arrives at a moment when he is reading his last. And sometimes the official messenger arrives with the news just a few hours after he closes his eyes. Isn't this ridiculous? How have you trained yourself that you are able to emancipate yourself from such things in good time?
Thank you. So there's a repetition that's happening here. Repetition on still. Still clinging to these things and unwilling to let go. He looks about with knitted eyebrows, inquiring if the carriage is ready. He is still slow to depart, and passing out the gates in the capital, he still looks back. When back at his farm, he still disdains to occupy himself with planting rice and hemp and beans. Morning and night, he'll be asking for news from the capital, or he will still be writing letters to his friends at the court, and such thoughts flit back and forth in breast ceaselessly until he draws his last breath. Right? All of these stills is a function to illustrate what? He can't let go. There we go. Unwillingness to let go. Right? Every individual sentence is an illustration of something, but the ability to see between the lines or underneath those individual examples is critical reading. That's pattern recognition. Is that he can't let go, right? Still writing letters to his friends back at court. What does that illustrate? Still occupy himself about the news of the capital, right? Still not willing to depart. Still looking back. They are all illustrations for something, and the ability to figure that something out is pattern recognition, which is critical reading, right? Okay. And then if you really need to know very quickly the position of the author or the position of the speaker, it's this kind of stuff. Isn't this ridiculous? Rhetorical questions. Right? This is the main character's friend telling him about the story and then saying, isn't this ridiculous? Right? And we actually see a lot of rhetorical questions in Seneca, right? Especially when he's mad. He's upset, he's ranting. He's like, isn't this ridiculous? Basically, he does a lot of these moments where he asks the reader or puts it in rhetorical questions. Do you not see how ridiculous this is? Right? Okay, Bean, can you read the next part for us? Mm-hmm. Yep. Leisure. Ming Lao Tzu, yeah.
It seems that I have come to an awakening to a sense of life's trendy. I have looked at LSD,
The skies.
and wondered how the sun and the moon and the stars and the
Milky Way.
was were day and night like crazy.
Okay, good. So what you're realizing very quickly is that he says examples, right? He uses a lot of similes here. I've looked at the skies and wondered how the sun and the moon and the stars and the Milky Way rush westward at night like busy people. These kind of things aren't that important. Sentences like this don't really tell us much, right? It just is, all of this just sums up to people are busy. People, busy, done, right? You just want to be able to recognize and not waste your time on reading things that don't matter, right? If it's just about that, that's it, we're fine. Okay, Caitlin, can you read the next part for us?
Today passes and never returns, and although tomorrow comes, it is no longer today. This year passes and never returns, and although there is next year, it is no longer this year. And so the days of nature are steadily lengthened, or unrolled, while the days of my life are daily shortened, and outside the 36,000 mornings, time does not belong to me. The years of nature are steadily unrolled, while the years of my life become steadily shortened, and beyond 100, they do not belong to me. Furthermore, the so-called 100 and the so-called 36,000 in life are not always as we wish them to be. And among the days and years, most are passed in bad weather and sorrow and worry and running about. How many moments are there when the day is beautiful and the company is enjoyable? When the moon and the wind are good and our heart is at ease and our spirit happy. When there is music and song and wine and we can enjoy ourselves and while away the hours. The sun and the moon pursue their courses as fast as the bullet, and when their wheels are about to go behind the western
Precipice?
The arms of the strongest man on earth cannot hold them and make them travel eastward. Even the eloquence of Shu Qing and Cheng Yi cannot persuade them to travel eastward. Even the wit and the strategy of Zhou Zi and Yan Ying cannot change their mind and make them travel eastward. Even the sincerity of Qing Wei, who knocked himself against the rainbow and was transformed into a bird, trying to fill the sea of her regrets with pebbles, cannot touch their hearts and make them travel eastward. Writers throughout the ages who discuss this point have always held it as a matter of eternal regret.
Good. So thank you. This part is quite interesting, right? He is clearly illustrating something that he feels strongly about, especially again with that repetition of even. What's the function of even here? What's the pattern? What is it trying to highlight? How do we figure out what he is trying to talk about? Sun and moon pursue their courses as fast as the bullet, and when their wheels are about to go behind the western precipice, the arms of the strongest man on earth cannot hold them and make them travel eastward. Even the eloquence of Su Chen and Zhang Yi cannot persuade them to travel eastward. Even the wit and strategy of Chou Lizi and Yan Ying cannot change their minds and make them travel eastward. Even the sincerity of Qing Wei, who knocked herself against the rainbow and was transformed into a bird, trying to fill the sea of her regrets with pebbles, cannot touch their hearts and make them travel eastward. Writers throughout their age who discuss this point have always held it as a matter of eternal regret. What is he talking about here? What's the metaphor? What cannot be changed? Yes, good. Something cannot be changed, right? Specifically, is it just life? Perhaps also nature, right? He's trying to argue, like Ryan said, that things cannot be changed, even if you are this person, the strongest man on earth, even if you have the eloquence, even if you're smart and have strategy, even if you have sincerity, even if, right, you do all these sacrifices, you cannot make the sun and moon travel eastward. Life and nature has a way of things that cannot be changed. Exactly. That's the pattern. How is Ryan able to get that? Right? Sun and moon cannot go eastward. no matter who you are and what you do, right? And then the next thing is you extrapolate that. You extrapolate that onto something more general and say, well, that means life has its own rhythm. Regardless of human interference. Right? Regardless of human interference, there's a way that things just is. We can't really do anything else about that. The other repetition that we saw earlier, that Caitlin read, was the part where he says, time does not belong to me. Right? And we could hear it just from the reading, that today passes and never returns, and although tomorrow comes, it is no longer today. This year passes and never returns, and although there is next year, it is no longer this year. Even just that alone tells us, right? Things pass and are never to return. Time passes, never returns. Right? This is very similar to the theme here, that life and nature cannot be changed. It has its own way. But what you realize is, as you're reading, it's a step-by-step process. He establishes that time passes and there's nothing you can do, and then he goes on to say that nature has its own way and there's nothing we can do, right? It's all step-by-step. Sometimes we just have to be close enough and pay a little bit more attention to where things are going, right? And so the days of nature are steadily lengthened or unrolled, while the days of my life are daily shortened. And outside the 36,000 mornings, time does not belong to me. The years of nature are steadily unrolled, and while the years of my life become steadily shortened and beyond 100, they do not belong to me. Furthermore, the so-called 100 and the so-called 36,000 in life are not always as we wish them to be. And among the days and years, most are passed in bad weather and sorrow and worrying about. Right? We see this also in the shortness of life. About how most of life is just wasted by worrying. Right? And worry, suddenly we discover, is yet another theme that we haven't realized. And that came from the importance of living, right? We saw that here, and we're like, oh wait, yeah, definitely. Talk about worrying here. Okay. How many moments are there when the day is beautiful and the company enjoyable, when the moon and the wind are good and our heart is at ease and our spirit happy, blah, 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 blah. Right? They do not belong to me. This passage here is an indication of what? To say that time does not belong to me. William, what do you think? Like, what is he trying to get to say that time does not belong to me?
Basically saying, like, can't control it, no one can.
Yeah, outside of the 36,000 mornings, time does not belong to me. Beyond 100 years, they do not belong to me.
So, kind of like, this life isn't entirely in his control, too. Kind of? No.
He's basically saying that whatever is allocated to me is mine, but then outside of that is not, right? And in Seneca, you said the same thing. People tend to live like they can live forever, but then suddenly realize they haven't lived at all, right? It's the opposite of this argument, but it's this part where time does not belong to me that is outside of my 36,000 mornings. Time does not belong to me that is outside of 100 years, right? The time outside of my allocation is not mine. Therefore, I can only do what I can. In those small slivers, right? Of time. Okay, Jason, can you read the next part for us? And I have looked at the earth.
I have looked at the earth where high banks are from the waters of valleys and deep valleys have been heaved up into mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And the water of the rivers and lakes flow night and day eternally eastward into the sea.
Mm-hmm.
Has said, since I took over my city, I have seen the sea each time change into a mulberry fig, and vice versa.
Good. What is he trying to say here? What's the metaphor being painted here to say that I've seen high banks level into valleys and deep valleys heaved up into mountains, water of rivers and lakes flow night eastward, blah, 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 blah. If it's not clear, let's keep reading. Let's read on. Jason, can you read the next part for us as well?
Again, I have looked at the living things of this world, how they are born and grow old and full ill and violent, being now dressed in the know of yin and yang, like oil in the frying pan, which, being heated by fire from below, rise up in a shorter while, while like candle which flickers in the wind and soon goes out. Its tears being dried up and its soup falling to the table. For like a boat cut adrift on a big sea, washed forward by a successive wave and floating it and not with it. Besides, the seven desire again continues to bear him up, and the pleasures of the flesh bear him down. He is sometimes too much disappointed and sometimes too much elated, and usually too much bored.
Mm-hmm.
Without more than 100 years at his disposal, his plan to live for 1,000 years, and while sitting like oil on fire, his ambition stretched beyond years. Why wonder, therefore, that his being quickly deteriorates when old age comes along and his vital energy is used up and his spirit wanders away from people?
Good. Well, what is he saying? Any summary? Austin, what do you think? What's going on here? This is like a more advanced or harder version of what we did previously, right? There is, again, a certain repetition of some kind of imagery. Huh? Wait, what?
He wants to help me.
I didn't say that.
But what is going on?
I'm not so sure.
Okay. William, you want to volunteer?
Not quite yet.
The way to go about this is to pick one of the examples and try to figure out something out. Like just pick any of them and then try to work your way out of that puzzle, right? Like I know what a boat is. I know what it's like to be caught adrift on a big sea. Okay, that kind of feels like being lost, right? Something about endlessness, right? I get the endlessness from the big sea. The boat is probably like a person, right? And then big sea is kind of like time. Okay, maybe that's something that we can work on, this idea of endlessness and being lost. What about washed forward by successive waves and floating, it knows not whither? Well, probably the same idea, right? Just things happening.
The waves are kind of out of your control, so it's just kind of reinforcing the idea that time is out of our control.
Yeah. So it's kind of like things happening to you, right? If you're the boat and waves crashing into you, There's this idea of being lost, endlessness, and things happening to you. Okay, what about, or like a candle which flickers in the wind and soon goes out, it tears being dried up and its soot fall into the table. Well, the second part doesn't seem that useful, but at least the candle part, flickers in the wind and soon goes out, shortness of life, or fragileness. Okay, what about like oil in a frying pan, which being heated by fire from below dries up in a short while? Again, shortness of life, fragileness of life. And again, I have looked at the living things of this world, how they are born and grow old and fall ill and die. Oh, right? Things happen, fragileness of life, and being ground thus in the mill of yin and yang, right? This idea of yin and yang means what? Whenever we see people talk about yin and yang, right? Typically, we're talking about certain ideas whenever we see yin and yang. What is it about? What are we talking about here? Usually, we hear people pair it with this idea of 无常. What does it mean, though? Annie, do you have any interpretations for this? Uncertainty, good. And isn't that what we've been talking about, right? Endlessness, things happening to you, being lost, don't know what's going to happen. This feeling of uncertainty gets a check mark. But also, interestingly, with this idea of uncertainty, at least in yin and yang, is a consistency. How is it possible that uncertainty and consistency can be in the same sentence? Well, you can be sure that life will be uncertain, right? There is a consistency in the uncertainty of life. This is 无常的意思。人生无常。It's uncertain, but we can be certain that it's uncertain. Right? And now, if we look at this part, that first paragraph that Jason read, and I have looked at the earth where high banks have been leveled into valleys and deep valleys have been heaved up into mountains, and the water of the rivers and lakes flows night and day eternally eastward into the sea. He's talking about change, which is inconsistency, or which is the uncertainty, right? Since I took over my duty, I have seen the sea 3 times change into a mulberry field, and vice versa. He's talking about change, but then he's also talking about how these changes change back, right? So not only is there always change, he's saying that there's a pattern to these changes. It changes back. There is a certain uncertainty in life, but there is consistency in the uncertainty. That there is a pattern in the way things work, or in the movement or flow of life and nature. So that's at least the first part up to this point, right? besides is where things change. Everything from here to whither is about this idea of consistency and uncertainty in life. This is a bit difficult, right? Because we have to at the same time grasp Taoism, this idea of yin and yang, but also play with these different examples. So what you guys notice is this kind of slowly working upwards, right? All I did was pick an example. If we can get it, okay, let's go on to another example. Let's go on to another example. Now, if we don't know what yin and yang represents, that's when you want to start looking up things, right? And then again, right, I just said this is about change, and it's just that one key word, changed. Really, right? And eventually work our way together. Now the second part, besides, the 7 desires of man continue to burn him up, and pleasures of the flesh pare him down. 7 desires of man. 他在讲的是七情六欲。Right? This is where it's useful when you have like a Chinese background, right? You at least have reference to what's going on. Continues to burn him up, and pleasures of the flesh pare him down. He is sometimes too much disappointed and sometimes too much elated, usually too much worried. Wait, there's also another repetition here. Too much, too much, too much. Very simply then, too much of anything is no good. Everything in moderation, or balance, is better. Right? That's the whole idea of Taoism. That's also what this symbol represents, right? Everything in balance or moderation is better. But this is also the same idea of Stoicism, which is the philosophy that Seneca represents, right? You want to control what you can. In Stoicism, the whole idea is that you want to control the things you can and not be impacted by the things you cannot control. And the way to do that is to have everything in moderation. Moderation plays a big role in Stoicism. So suddenly you find that, wait, Stoicism and Taoism actually talk to each other, just a slightly different angle. Right? One has a focus on just balance. The other has a focus on what you can do with that balance or with that moderation. Okay. And then the rest, without more than 100 years at his disposal, he plans to live for 1,000, and while sitting like oil on fire, his ambitions stretch beyond the universe. Why wonder, therefore, that his being quickly deteriorates when old age comes along and his vital energy is used up and his spirit wanders away from its abode? No wonder, right? People are depressed. It comes up to basically mean this, right? No wonder people who live like this are depressed or unfulfilled, right? Because they are not in balance. He plans to live 1,000 years. He's stretched beyond the universe, his ambitions, right? Oh, no wonder they are unfulfilled and sad because there is no balance in their life. Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back at 3:45 and we'll finish this piece up. So for the next part of class, I actually want us to do something a bit more interesting. Like on page 357, the last sentence, I've seen princes and dukes and generals and premiers whose crowded roofs form a skyline like the clouds, blah, 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 blah. All the way down to the end of page 359, that paragraph where he says, and so I signed in silence, and sometimes my tears dropped and my heart's desires were turned cold like ashes. I want you guys to work with the person next to you and to try to come up with, as short as possible, a summary of what's going on these 2 pages. So, 用最短的方式去 and most accurate translation of these 2 paragraphs. From page 358 to 359. The first paragraph of 359. So 2 things to go for: as short, as concise as possible, and as high res as possible.
High res.
Yeah, high resolution as in accurate translation. So like as little loss in detail as possible. Ryan, you can move to the front here if you would like to work with these 3. And I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes to work on that. So page 358 to the first paragraph of 359. As short as possible.
You're just reading it and making it sound.
Try to satisfy both categories though. As concise as possible, as high res as possible. Yeah. Yeah.
我一起做。
358, 359. In as few sentences as possible and as high resolution as possible. Okay, and some tips to go about this. First of all, divide and conquer. You want to divide it at the certain points where you realize he's talking about something else. So you break them into smaller themes or categories. Number two, work with themes, right? Motifs. Generally, what are these examples talking about? What themes are we going for? By reverse engineering, number three, it's like you can look for a quote that you like and work backwards, right? Like we did up there. And then number four, import, which is just to bring in your own quotes, own sayings or things that you think of or remember, and add that into your own analysis here. These are all things we've done in class, so. Your own summary. Any move in a bit? I'll sit with you guys. Thanks. Okay. Okay, 你们现在看到哪里？卡住吗？看不太懂。看完了吗？Okay. Bean, what about you?
So I'm not really sure
What's going on, right? Good, okay. So we want to begin, at least first of all, if you're not sure what you're reading, right, you want to find parts that you are sure of. 就是看哪里你可以先 at least get a hold of yourself, right? 那在这个里面，你们有哪一个 sentence 觉得是自己可以 at least 看得懂的？哪里 ？Okay. Day and night they give feasts, and their halls are full of painted women. 那看得懂的部分是哪里？Yeah, okay. So it's like they're partying, right? Okay, good. There's a party. Okay. Now, an easy way to build your understanding is look for contrast. Right? If we keep reading, when a monk passes by, they shout at him with thundering voice, and he dares not even to look at the house. It's another thing, right? It's just have nothing to do with the party, but okay, let's keep in mind the monk. But after 20 or 30 years, the monk passes by again, and he sees a stretch of wild grass and broken tiles covered by dew and frost. And a cold sun is shining upon the place, and the moaning wind passes by with no roof left standing. So the contrast is no party, right? 那他基本上要讲的是什么？就是物换星移啊，事情都变了嘛。So 大概你就可以知道说 ，OK， 我们这个地方讲的就是物换星移。Right? Time changes things, and there's not much we can do. Right? 人生无常无换星，就是大概这些 idea. Okay. And then he goes on to say, what was once the scene of song and dance and merrymaking is today the pasture ground of a few cowherd boys. Right? That is basically the summary of what he just said. Right? So you'll realize there's several levels to reading. 他这个是给我们直接的 example, and then there's the summary of what he just said, right? That's actually the sentence that you can just highlight or underline，这是会比较重要，因为它这个是重点。曾经怎么样，现在变怎么样，right？ 事过境迁嘛，就是这些都是一样的意思。Okay，did they ever realize when they were at the height of their prosperity and laughing and merrymaking that this day would come? And why did the great glories of this world pass away in the twinkling of an eye? 那这又是什么？这句话又跟之前的又有一点不一样，不是完全不一样 ，It's not totally different, right？ 它的只有一点点的不一样，它的差别在哪里？
Then what can you read?
When they're party, they don't think that everything will be different, everything will disappear.
Right， 所以他前面讲的都是物换星移跟事过境迁，但是差别在这里是 Did they ever realize？ 就是我们在讲的的确是这些事情，就是 things change， 但是 the new element being introduced in this part of the reading is self-awareness. Right? Were you aware of these changes while it was happening? So you realize the reading builds on itself. 只是说我们要看得很仔细说 ，OK， 前面是在讲物换星移，但是后面还是讲这个，只是说多加了什么 ？What's new? Right? Okay, self-awareness. Then, and why did the great glories of this world pass away in the twinkling of an eye? Was it alone like the garden of Chinku? That's just example, right? 所以我们其实根本不需要看这种东西 right? And the pool of blah, 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 blah. 这些都 not really important. On my leisure days, I have passed out of the city and gone up on the hills where I saw a stretch of grave mounds. Oh, suddenly it seems like we're talking about something else, right? That's where we want to cut the reading. 因为他一直在讲说 did they ever realize that this day would come? And why did the great glories of this world pass in twinkling of an eye? Was it alone like the garden and the pool that gradually came to ruins of 100,000 years? 三个问号 right? 三个问句 repetition, and then there's a break in the repetition, right? When there's a break in the repetition, it tells us that we're in something else. On my leisure days, I've passed out of the city and gone up the hills where I saw, okay, now we're in a different story. And we apply the same process that we just did there. 就是 example 在讲什么 What's new? What's the same? And then we figure out the meaning, right? Okay, now you guys do it. So 基本上它的三个 process 就是 example is about what, what's new, and then so what. 大概是 1, 2, and 3. So you guys give that a try, and I'll come back. Okay, how's it going for you guys?
Decent.
Sure?
Yeah. Worry about them more.
What about you guys?
We got a sentence, but I think we need more time. So then we can make our sentence better.
So you guys hit it? Nice. I do that to my teachers too.
We can upgrade our sentence
Okay.
to the same thing.
What do you have so far? Throw her under the bus like that.
Using hours, right? You spilled half hours and you just decided to use it.
Okay.
Hey, don't take credit. Don't take credit.
We
It
didn't
was
copy.
hours of
We were inspired.
Whatever you say.
So
Stop trying to be prepared. Jamal, calm down.
So what is it? What is it?
Like, time is everlasting, but humans aren't.
Uh-huh.
Our possessions will like move on without us.
Okay,
That's the sentence.
great.
That's almost hours.
Calm down.
worth.
But that seems like
Calm down.
same reading.
We're doing the same thing, so that's why our answers are the same thing.
That's not how the
Yeah.
logic works.
Jamal,
Good.
calm
The
down.
correct answer is always the same. Okay.
Calm down.
Good. What about the second part?
What second part?
What part?
There's that first paragraph and there's a second paragraph.
Yeah, it was like
There's a slight difference though. That second part. You got the first part right.
Calm down. Calm down.
What about you guys?
Calm down.
We're confused.
Confused? Okay. How do we go about understanding what's going on
We'll skip some of it.
here? Okay. So good. Were you just like eavesdropping? Or you wrote it down yourself?
I wrote it down.
Good.
Like when I'm doing it.
Great, that's good. That's exactly what I wrote too. Self-awareness. And then partying, and then no more partying, right? So if the example is about partying and then no more partying, right? It has something to do with time, passage of time. And then on top of that passage of time, he then talks about this part. Did they ever realize when they were at the height of their prosperity and laughing and merrymaking that this day would come? And why did the great glories of this world pass away in the twinkling of an eye? So really the key is understanding this sentence. Did they ever realize when they were at the height of their prosperity and laughing and merrymaking that this day would come? All of this example is just to say that this day, right, the change. But the real thing is this part. Did they ever realize that difference? Right. And then by dividing and conquer, I meant this part where he just gives us 3 consecutive questions, right? Repetition, repetition, repetition. And then he says, on my leisure day I have passed something going on. And then he goes on to these questions again. So you can see that this is a repetition for something, this is a repetition for something, right? Or were these people princes and dukes, or were they pages and servants? Or were they heroes, or were they fools? How can I know from this stretch of yellow soil? 2 different ideas going on. So that's where I would cut it. Right? First part is about something, second part is about something. Right? Same thing here. The repetition. Question, question, question. Right? And then question, question, question. But then there's a break in that repetition. On my leisure day I've passed out of the city and gone up the hill where I saw a stretch of grave mounds. So that's where I would cut things. Right there. There's something going on up here, something going on down there. Right? So your sentence is pretty good up to this point.
Yeah.
On my leisure days.
I think to here.
Huh?
Like this part.
That second part.
Not that second part.
Wait, what? What are you trying to say?
I'm saying that she wrote something else about.
Like, I added while people are not aware of it.
That part was good. Yeah.
Does
That first
cover this
part. Not really. What is this part talking about? About these questions? About like, were these people hero or fools?
Yang or Hang or Qing or whatever.
It's not quite about time anymore, right? How are you guys doing?
Like we had drawn some 2 conclusions.
Uh-huh.
Like first, it talks about like this part. We think that boats means the life's direction, and
Yeah.
carriers means the what we earn from life, like wealth and power. And this can connect to this sentence that says, I feel the instability of wealth and power and wish to keep them at a distance in order to run a more courses like
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
The narrative wants to find his boats instead of carriers, like instead of finding wealth and power, finding the life direction.
Mm-hmm.
And because the boats can represent the like being lost in the big sea.
Okay, good. Good stuff.
How many things do you think there is?
How many what themes in here?
Yeah.
If you dig deep enough, there's like a lot.
Don't do that.
But generally speaking, this first part is about time, right? How things happen and we're not aware of the change while it's happening to us until it's too late, right? This part is more about identity, right? This idea of like, well, all of these people are buried in their graves. Do you know if they are Chinese or whites or whatever? Like, identities is what we hold on to when we're alive, but when we're dead, is that still the same thing, right? And then that's what he's saying a lot about. You know, these are things that we hold on to so dearly, but then time passes. Well, how do you know, right? And then therefore that part you said, like, I would rather keep a distance from these things. I would rather not have these identities. I would rather, you know, be free from these things. Yeah. So the two themes is generally time and then the identity and then how they interact with each other. Okay, let's see. How are you guys doing? Second part.
Like we think that like author is curious about them, like really aware that they can never achieve or never use some things, because here we say about the self. So I think this part is the author is curious about them.
Yeah. Okay.
The next part is a example of the author.
Good. Good. I have stopped the. Yeah. Good.
How do you not know what the word is?
Okay. Let's come back.
This is even very contemporary language. You don't go around the place and telling.
All right. So, do you guys have your sentences? Did you guys write a sentence for that? Did you guys do it? Here you go. Here you go. Yeah. Here you go. Here you go. I need one more piece of paper. 再给我一张纸. Yeah. 可以啊. Here you go. Go for it.
This is about time, which is how people didn't realize the things, the problems that should happen during that time. And this part is about yeah. And the things that she just talked about.
Right.
That Ryan talked about.
Wait, our summary is confined to one sentence.
No. There's only two rules: as concise as possible and as high resolution as possible.
Make it as one word.
If you can do it in one word, I'd be really impressed. This kind of process takes like several tries. You like come up with several sentences, and then you condense those sentences, and then you work your way upwards.
Anything you want to write about. So this is just brainstorming.
Used to be the case, no longer the case.
Let's write anything.
Move on without identity.
Does that make sense?
I don't want to add like, does it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's that.
You can just write it down.
Sorry, sure.
Doesn't matter if it's correct or not.
That's how I feel too.
But no, really this one.
Oh,
I don't mind.
you wish,
I
man.
honestly don't mind.
I mean, you could technically just walk out.
Really?
I mean, what can I do?
You don't want to stop us?
Call my mother.
That's just boring. Like I'm not gonna play those kind of games. When they're closed and they're left on their worries behind.
Says, well, different types of this we got two types. One which is let's use this example. Moth and tree. This is like prince. Here it mentioned princes, dukes, generals. Prince, dukes. Generals. And this is the monk. Two types of people. Step it up. And where's the eye here?
So we got this one.
Well, you guys are very scientific.
Because the main destination here
This is the second whole thing.
which they got different.
Wait, you guys got something?
Yeah. I don't think you read that.
No, I definitely can't.
Go!
I wonder how many
Here, can you write it in legible letters? Legibly.
I can read it too.
Oh, okay. Here, let me see. White people.
No, wild.
Oh, wild people aren't. No. I've already got two words wrong out of three.
No, try. No, what is this word?
Can't.
Art. That's art.
I got to say a word wrong twice. While people aren't aware, time is everlasting, but humans.
See?
That's what inference though. That's like pure inference. Aren't thus wait.
Yeah.
But humans aren't. Oh, thus objects. Now. Oh my god. Did you write this? Move on. Us. Identity is what? Okay. Please. Here. You're fired. Here. Yeah, you can write it.
I thought you
Are
were
you reading like up to here?
Yeah. You can read farther though.
Oh, we read some.
Oh, that's fine.
Wait, read it to me. I can't read it.
Cool. And
Yeah, I gave him my best shot.
yeah, that's good.
Oh, it is?
It's interesting how we come up with different approaches, but we're all hitting around the same idea. Yeah. How are you guys doing?
It's only 2 sentences, so
Good. That's really good, actually. That's a really great example.
Like the whole point of I was fired from this job.
Hey, what about you guys? Looking good?
I don't know. We're just writing something down.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Awareness,
Yes.
comma, time,
She writes like comma CLMMA in there.
Yeah.
Here, let me have that. I will. Thank you.
where are you writing those out?
Yes,
Oh, good.
this is good. Good stuff.
Yo, you sure the last one?
This is mine.
task,
And I'll take that.
content,
I'll also take yours. Thank you. We'll have people change until there's 2 weeks.
identity, is,
Memorable identity. Cool.
define,
Oh, well, fair enough.
when,
Come on. What's
we are
If they manage to last us
Alive.
until 5, I'm gonna be impressed.
Oh, this is definitely gonna get to 5.
it
No, I mean like if they're gonna
isn't
write all the way until 5.
Oh.
when wait what no
What?
it isn't what
That we need to see.
no it isn't when we are there
So what?
it isn't when we are there it isn't when we are there
Comma to find our true identity.
You know what it is.
period because
Comma the true
of
identity of our
this count the author words like to be free to be free
Like, what are they even
From-
doing?
He's reading and then she's scribing.
period
老师好了，
好，谢谢。
Well, thank God.
这里的别。
Thanks.
What?
好了吗？你们好了吗
Do you not read?
You just gave me the plan.
make it as concise as possible.
Good. Okay.
Sentences is yours.
If people aren't aware, time is everlasting. Humans aren't the objects.
Because yours was the last one. Have a comma after thus, you genius.
Instead of travel, we use like explicit. We don't use metaphor, but instead we use like life.
Oh, you want? Alright. What is travel versus percent? Use.
Yes.
You need glasses.
Okay. Waiting for you guys. Wonder about, oh no. Okay. Okay, turn in, let's go. Train's leaving. Great. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna read. Okay, I want you guys to pay attention and write on your own reading the similarities or themes that are emerging from all these different analyses. All right, the pattern recognition is what we're doing here. And also just pay attention to how other people are explaining the same thing. So here's the first one. This is by Austin and Mia. People are unaware of the changes. Oh, wait, no. Oh, this one, sorry. Because I want to. Well, people aren't aware time is everlasting, but humans aren't. Thus, objects move on without us. Identity is what defines us when we are alive, but it isn't when we are dead. Because of this, the author would like to be free from identity. Okay? Some things that come out: identity, alive, time being everlasting, and then awareness. Cool. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is Maxine's group. Maxine, Caitlin, and Ryan, right? No, wait, Timothy. People aren't aware of the changes happening to them until it is too late. They spent their lives worrying, planning meaningless things. They don't develop a meaningful, memorable identity. Identity, unaware of the changes, right? Being too late, and then how you spend your life. Okay. What about the next one?
Ours is the one about the the last one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not the whole thing?
No.
Okay. Everything will eventually die or be forgotten, but time will go on. Same themes. So rather than waste our time over insignificant matters, we should enjoy a simple life to experience happiness. Okay. Let's see. What about Ryan's group? Okay, I'm struggling to read this though. The narrator indicates two different values of purpose. Okay, you know what? Can you come in? Here, go and read that. Sorry.
Narrator indicates two different values and purpose of life. Travels as an example. What are their destination? It can be a purpose and value of life and evolve with time. And second, what's the most important experience during the trip? The true identity of themselves. It can be their desires and the materials.
Okay.
And the narrator used travelers as example of human beings that are seeking for the true purpose of life.
Okay, good. Thank you. So let me try that again. The narrator indicates two different values of purpose of life. Travelers is a metaphor that you guys are using here as an example. So travelers as an example, what are their destination, purpose? Maybe it's purpose in life, the value of life. What's the most important experience, the true identity of ourselves? And you're saying desires and materials are what? What do these things have to do with the sentence here? Desires and materials.
When we are finding out identity, we are involved with interests and desires.
Oh, okay. Identities. Cool. And its interactions. Great. Let's see. Here is mine. I just wrote really quickly. What used to be is no longer. Who one used to be is no longer. How can we know when it all ends? Right? And I didn't write about the so what, because here's a really great example of so what. This is by Bean and Annie, right? Yeah. people have to have self-awareness to realize the change beside you. Right? We're all getting towards the same idea. And what you'll realize is that this is a good example of so what, right? Questions like explain the significance. Right? And what Annie and Bean have done is they've explained the significance of the passage. What's the point of the passage? What is it trying to teach us? Well, people have to realize or have to have self-awareness that about the change that is happening to you. And then from here we can extrapolate because blah, 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 blah. It helps blah, 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 blah. And then obviously you guys have done examples of that. This is an example of summary, right? So is, I think, this one. These are examples of summaries, if we pay close attention. What used to be is no longer, who one used to be is no longer. How can we know when it all ends? This is kind of like this idea of awareness, right? I'm just trying to summarize in very short sentences or a very short idea those 2 pages that we read. Same thing that's done here. When people aren't aware, time is everlasting, but humans aren't. Thus, objects move on without us. Identity is what defines us when we are alive, but it isn't when we are dead. Because of this, the author would like to be free from identity. Because of this, rather than saying the author, we should be free from identity, right? That's a very nice and easy way to just explain those 2 pages. Here's a really good example of how to use metaphors to explain what you're trying to do, right? Metaphors are always very useful as a shortcut to show that you understand. But the way to go with it or to use it, you don't need to say as an example. Just say, the narrator indicates 2 different values of purpose of life. You don't even need to say the narrator. Just say, there's 2 different, there's 2 purposes to life, right? A traveler purpose is, you can play the metaphor even further, the journey, right? As well as the destination, as well right? And then now that you've set up the metaphor, you can say the journey is the destination is, right? You can say, for example, the journey, instead of saying is something, you can say requires one to pay full attention. In order to enjoy, right? The destination, let's see, do you have answers here? The destination is simplicity and happiness, right? That's an example of how you can take a metaphor and go with it, right? Instead of saying traveler as an example, there's too much explaining, just go with it. Just take the metaphor and take it quite literally. It makes the explaining a lot more fluid, right? And then as the reader or the grader or the teacher, I can say for sure, right? I can be pretty confident that you understand because you have a grasp of the metaphor, right? It's a nice proxy to assuming you understand. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. So, the one that I have here is a bit weird, right? It takes a few steps away from the reading itself. And I'm just trying to generalize the points here. What used to be is no longer, what one used to be is no longer. This is about identity. This is about changes, right? And then how can one know when it all ends is about awareness. Those are the three themes that we get from this reading, right? From these 2 pages. But yeah, let's go to the actual source text and let's look at how I was able to get to that, or how you guys were able to get to that. Let's see. Melody, can you read this first part for us? Just from 358. When the dinner bells.
When the dinner bell sounded, about the people were eating together at home. Their gates are open in the morning. Crowds of visitors. Day and night they give feasts, and their halls are full of his. When a monk passes by, they shout at him with a thundering voice, and he dares not even to look at the house. So after 20 or 30 years, the monk passes by again, and he sees a stretch of wild grass and broken cows covered by blue frost, and a cold sun shining upon the place, and a moaning wind passes by, not a roof left standing. What was once the scene of summer dance and merry days, today the pastured ground of a few founder boys. Did they ever realize, when they were at the height of their prosperity and lack of merrymaking, that this day would come? And why did the great glories of this world pass away in this season?
Okay, great, thank you. So, I explained to, I think, Bean and Annie earlier, there's several processes to this. The first is to ask yourself, these examples are about what? Right? We've done this in the previous page where there's repetition, right? All of these examples point towards something. What is it? That's the first question you want to ask yourself. Examples of what? And then the second thing is what's new, like what's being added. And then the third is so what? But just keep that in mind. We'll go into the text. So the text gives us an example of party versus no more party, right? There's a feast, people eating together. There's clamor. Day and night, their feast and their halls are full of painted women. When a monk passes by, they shout at him with a thundering voice. And then there's no party. But after 20 years, and sees a stretch of wild grass, right? The contrast is an easy way for you to find what these examples are trying to tell us, right? Party to no party. Okay, this is the contrast of what? Time, right? Changes everything. Right? Ideas of 中文就是物换星移或者是事过境迁嘛。Right, with no roof left standing. Still the same idea, no party. What was once the scene of song and dance and merrymaking is today the pasture ground of a few cowherd and boys. That's the summary sentence. That's the sentence that's kind of telling you, okay, if you didn't get the point, this is the point. Right? The author is very nice in that they actually told us, oh, this is what the point is. What used to be is no longer. That's where I got the first sentence from. You guys see that? What was once the scene of song and dance is of a few cowherd. What used to be is no longer. That's just what he's saying. And all I did was generalized that point. Okay. Did they ever realize when they were at the height of their prosperity and laughing and merrymaking that this day would come? And why did the great glories of this world pass away in the twinkling of an eye? Was it alone like the garden of Chinku, the tower of Dongtai, the hall of Pishang, and the pool of Taiyi, that gradually became ruins after passages of hundreds of thousands of years, right? If you haven't got the point yet, yeah, time changes everything. In what way? Atrophy, right? It gets destroyed. Everything goes back into dust. But that's a new element here, right? That's the second part of what I'm trying to tell you guys. These are examples of time atrophying, but what's new here? Did they ever realize this element of self-awareness is the new idea that's being introduced here? When they were at the height of their prosperity and laughing and merrymaking, that this day would come. This is still the same. It's this part. Did they ever realize, right? Everything takes like single step forward. Time changes everything. Are you aware of things changing? Next thing, next thing. They build on top of each other. Okay. The other thing is, where is it that it breaks? Where's the break? It breaks right after that repetition. 3 questions and then a different point. On my leisure day, I've passed out the city and gone up the hill where I saw a stretch of grave mounds. Do these belong to Yen or Han or Qin or Wei? Or were these people princes and dukes, or were they pages and servants? Or were they heroes and were they fools? How can I know from this stretch of yellow soil? Right? Another really nice writing. But again, repetition of the questions. This is where things break. Right? That's the new idea. What are these examples of? Well, Yen, Han, Qin, Wei, pages, servants, princes, dukes, heroes or fools. All of these sum up to identities. Right? And then this sentence is slightly different, right? How can I know, again, this idea of awareness. Awareness. From this stretch of yellow soil, these grave mounds. Grave mounds symbolize what? Death, right? And that's because of time. So that's how it connects with the previous part. Time leads to death, leads to, right, all of these guys being buried, right? And these identity is the new element here. What's new? Identity is here. So I thought how they, when they were living, clung to glory and wealth, they vied with one another in their ambitions and struggle for fame, how they planned what they could never achieve and acquired what they could never use. Which one of them did not worry and plan and strive? One morning, their eyes closed for the eternal sleep and they left all their worries behind. So what is this? This is another idea. What's new? What's new this time? What is this about? Anybody? Uh-huh. Ah, okay, good. Meaningless pursuit. Right? Where did I get the meaningless from? Things they could never achieve, planned what they could never achieve, acquired what they could never use. right? Chelsea said, pretty much said the same idea. When they died, it all is the same again. Meaningless pursuit, busy work, right? Good. This example here, how do you know who they are, right? And which one did not plan? They all left their worries behind. Who one used to be is no longer, is where I got that from, right? Notice how it's not necessarily one particular sentence, but I was extrapolating from these examples. These questions are telling us, well, these identities don't mean anything when you're dead. Actually, this is the closest thing I can find. How can I know from this stretch of yellow soil who one used to be is no longer? Right? And then, why did I add this final sentence? How can you know when it all ends? Well, that's because that's the third theme that's been talking about, awareness, self-awareness. But I haven't addressed it yet, right? I haven't mentioned it in these two sentences yet. So I needed to add something to explain, okay, there's a level of self-awareness that is missing for these people that are planning the things they could never achieve, acquire what they could never use. So what is the so what here? Without self-awareness, one lives a meaningless life. That's about it, right? What used to be is no longer. What one used to be is no longer. How can we know when it all ends? Without self-awareness, one lives a meaningless life. Sure, there's more ways or better ways to explain this, but this was just something I came up with on the spot, right? You can make it even more artistic by like writing in a haiku or something, but the point is this, right? You have your summaries, you have your so whats. All of this is just translating what is here, right? All I'm doing is just translating. This gives us the first sentence. This part gives us the second sentence. And then the in-between stuff, the awareness, comes from the third one. And then finally, this last sentence comes from this part, this orange part, right? I thought how they, when they were living, clung to glory and wealth, vied with one another in their ambitions and struggle for fame, how they planned what they could never achieve and acquire what they could never use. Which one of them did not worry and plan and strive? One morning, their eyes closed to eternal sleep, and they left all their worries behind. Right? Well, if we read on, I've stopped over at the residences of officials and wondered how many had taken another's place as the host of the house. I have looked at the records of the personnel at the court and wondered how many times old names had been struck off and new names put in. I have been at the mountain passes and at the ferries and gone up a high hill to look down upon the plain. And I've seen continuous processions of boats and carriages and wondered how many travelers they have carried away. And so I signed in silence, and sometimes my tears dropped and my heart's desires were turned cold like ashes. Again, right? Basically full words in Mandarin, kind of cheating, but 就是人生无常嘛, right? How many people have become the president of Taiwan, and how many more will come, right? You might think she is the current president, but then she's only going to be the current president for only so long, right? The idea is that people keep replacing people, right? Nothing is consistent except for inconsistency. So that's really like critical reading at its core, right? Just, again, pattern recognition and just translating confusing things into simpler ideas. If you have Mandarin, if you know Korean, if you know whatever, use that to your advantage, right? There's no reason why you shouldn't use what you already know to help you understand the readings, no matter how hard or easy it is. Any questions, comments so far? Okay. And I think most of you guys did a great job about this, right? Like, we go back to look at this now. People are unaware of the changes happening to them until it is too late. They spent their lives worrying, planning meaningless things. They don't develop a memorable identity. Yeah, gets to the point, right? While people aren't aware, time is everlasting, but humans aren't. Thus, objects move on without us. Identity is what defines us when we are alive, but it isn't when we are dead. Because of this, we should be free from identity, or we should work to be free from identity, right? Pretty much the same idea. Now, this is without the summary, but people have to have self-awareness to realize the change beside you. And then a bit further, because, this stuff here. And then here, another example. Everything will eventually die or be forgotten, but time will go on. So rather than waste our time over insignificant matters, we should enjoy a simple life to experience happiness. Yeah, right? That's another point. And then we've looked at these ones. Yep. Okay. And then the rest of the reading, I think, is pretty consistent, right? There's other stuff that we can dig into, right? Like, for example, No replies Ming Lao Tzu, I have felt sad from this sense of instability in life, and I have come to an awakening from this feeling of sadness. That's a theme of, like, every crisis is an opportunity. You get something out of what you feel sad about. Well, there is a reason that there is a meaning behind the sadness. Another thing that we can look at, again, is this part, contrast, right? If you guys remember that piece by George Orwell that I gave you guys when you came into class, before you came into class, happiness, can socialists be happy? He has an argument, right? Like, happiness comes from contrast, and that without contrast, you cannot experience happiness. Well, what is the argument here at 360? Take a look. How does contrast become an argument here? And what is being argued here by the author? It's very different, actually. Right? Orwell argues that you can only experience happiness through contrast. What about here by Lin Yutang? Mia, what's the argument here? What's the argument here? What's the argument here on page 360, this part? Or if I give you these Lego blocks, like happiness, contrast, how are they pieced together here? Is it the same argument? Like for this passage here where he says, when people come to a feast where lambs and cows are killed and all the delicacies that come from land and sea are laid out on the table, they all enjoy them at first, but when they come to the point of satiety, they begin to feel a sense of repulsion. Much better are meals of plain rice and green vegetables, which are mild and simple and good for one's health. Okay. The question is he making the same argument as George Orwell, that piece that you guys read as the Q&A, right? Where he says that if you live in heaven forever, heaven's going to be really boring very quickly.
I don't really think it's the same argument.
Okay. What's the difference here?
I think the other article is arguing how happiness, you cannot only be happy because you're happy by contrast, like you're sad, so then you're happy.
Yeah.
But I think this is more about how when you like, it have like a really like concentrated happiness or like a good time or like a very like intense or like time. After that, you kind of feel lonely because you love that feeling. Yeah.
So they're not exactly the same argument, but what is he saying about contrast and what is he saying about happiness? Anybody else? Mia makes a good point. Basically, here the argument is you need contrast to experience happiness. Well, experience anything in general, you need contrast. But what is the argument here about, what is being said about contrast and happiness here? How is it slightly different than what Orwell is arguing? Is it still important that we have contrast? Like, okay. No? Okay, what do you think, Ryan?
Like, there's a sentence that allowed at one time when I was official, I had no property or wealth outside a few books. At first I struggled with these books, but fearing that they might be a cause of envy on part of the water spirits, I threw them into the water. Like, it tells that happiness can be anywhere, but this different definition of happiness in different lifestyles.
Okay, cool. So he says happiness can be anywhere. Or I think here the contrast is that he's saying big contrast is bad, right? Mildness, mild contrast or small contrast, basically moderation. Contrast in moderation is good, right? But why is big contrast bad and small contrast good? It has something to do with happiness here. It has to do with the longevity of happiness. He's arguing that if we have happiness that is really big and crazy and intense, it turns very quickly into sadness, right? When you're really full and you're given more food, you feel a sense of repulsion. When there's a big party and at the end of it all, 人去楼空的时候, there's a sense of sadness, right? Big contrast leads to the opposite effect. Right? It's the idea of the pendulum swinging. The pendulum swings back. So what about the happiness part here? Well, happiness is much better when you have moderation, right? Light incense, open book. How do I know it's about moderation? Well, relative to a big party, right, just reading is much less intense, right? And from there, you can infer or extrapolate that this is about moderation. And like Ryan said, although I was at one time of my life an official, I had no property or wealth outside a few books. At first, I traveled with these books, but fearing that they might be the cause of envy on the part of water spirits, I threw them into the water. And now I haven't got anything outside this body. Does not then the charm of life remain for me long and lasting when my burdens are gone, my surroundings are quiet, my body is free, and my heart is leisurely? Right? This is, again, moderation or freedom. Having fewer responsibilities and then that leads to happiness. So how do they relate with each other? One argues that, well, you need contrast to experience happiness, but then he doesn't actually talk about whether or not this happiness is sustainable, right? Whereas this argument here is that there is a kind of happiness that is sustainable and long-lasting, and it's the one in moderation. So if we take a step back, here it talks about the types and which one is better, right? And here it only talks about how, but without the nuance of consequences. Okay? On that note, the reading for tomorrow's makeup class is going to be reading number 2 that you guys read for your Q&A. Okay? Thank you. Here you go. Here you go. Pass one to Austin, please. You guys should take a few, pass it on. It's only 2 pages, I think. 3? 4 pages, sure. You guys all read it already? Well, 2 sides, 4 pages. Yeah, you guys all read it already. And it's a totally different theme or idea this time. But using the same skills that you guys learned so far, try your best to understand what's going on. And then I'll see most of you guys tomorrow. Okay? You guys all got it? Yep, see you guys. Bye-bye.